Welcome to Theorycraft, a live podcast where game developers and their players engage in conversation. I hope all this stuff still works. It's been 3 weeks, but it's great to see you all again. Thanks everybody for coping with the schedule shift. We're trying to line up some RL visitations, so we're doing it. It was a pain to take the whole rig on the road for that John Stats episode a couple months back, so not this time. Chris, I guess you haven't been on the show for like about 5 weeks now, because when last we met, you had just been on stage downtown in Los Angeles with the OTK Games Expo. So congratulations, by the way. Super late congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Has it really been 5 weeks?
Dude, well, it was 2 weeks before 3 weeks ago, right? So
yeah.
Oof. You ship it yet?
Yeah. No, it was a really fun experience. Yeah, I missed that podcast that day. I had dinner with actually our investors after the OTK event. And I was stuck in LA anyways. Yeah, I'm on cooldown with LA now. It's just LA is a nightmare with parking, with driving, and just the traffic. I sent you that picture I saw. Gosh, Ethan Klein from what's his podcast called?
H3, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I saw him like when I was stuck in traffic. He was right next to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool. I think we were all at some point, probably, gosh, I don't know when it was, probably 6 months before the OTK event, or maybe 7 months or so, 7 to 8. I reached out to OTK from the very beginning, just because I knew a lot of the guys from when I was working on the WoW team, just bouncing ideas or getting their takes on stuff. Like most of the dev team on WoW since the beginning, I think, kind of had a connection with the player, whether it's on the WoW forums or back channels, like on a Discord or Ventrilo or whatever. I mean, that's kind of like how I got my job at Blizzard was, Kevin, where I was like talking with Tom on Tichondrius on Ventrilo and giving him some ideas. And then eventually, had the chance to interview for the team. And so Blizzard's always had this like deep heritage of talking directly to the player. And so it was something that I cared a lot about. And so after I left Blizzard, I kind of pitched the game, just the concept, just kind of what I would show the investors of what we wanted to do at Notorious for our first project that we call Project Honor. And so the response from OTK and from other influencers that I talked to, we talked with Bellular and Savix and Stoops and some others. The response was super positive and they all were really excited. And OTK has been really aggressive or ambitious about their next steps and growing, and they have all these ideas that they're telling me they want to do, which sounds really cool. And so they were partnering with WePlay, which is like actually a Ukrainian-based esports kind of company that hosts a lot of Dota tournaments and stuff like that. And so they were doing this summer game expo where they're going to show all these indie games off, and they pitched the idea of having us on there as like the finale, because of course, OTK has a strong history in, with World of Warcraft, and that's where our founding team all comes from. And so, we haven't shown any concept art of the game yet. And so I thought, well, we could maybe show 1 or 2 concept pieces, but it's so early in development. Like it's the first year and it's the first year of a startup small team where, you're trying to figure out how to work together, like how to none of us are producers, all trying to figure out a lot of foundational things. And so we're just not ready yet to show anything in engine of the game or anything like that. But we decided to show a few concept art pieces. And so it kind of ballooned and grew into a bigger thing where they actually came down, Trevor and Finn from OTK, to film a video on site at the studio. And then some of the creative talent like Rich and S-Fan came by, and that was a lot of fun filming that. And yeah, it was a blast. And, it's kind of really, we did this article with the Washington Post to kind of talk about the vision of this kind of story of the studio, and then also this partnership with OTK and what it kind of means. And I really think, a big thing here is this kind of newer era of these like newer, smaller indie game studios, and really kind of about building the direct connection with the player early on. Because I think a lot of, the media, like whether it's Kotaku or Polygon or all the various gaming media, it's just everyone tries to avoid them these days and go directly to the player, whether it's, Nintendo with their Nintendo Direct or whatever, right? And so And I think that's such a powerful strategy. And so if we're able to build this game and ship it, having OTK support there when we launch the game will be really powerful. And it's something that, not a lot of other projects and game studios have. And so we're still trying to figure out like what the partnership means in terms of, because a lot of people have the expectation like, oh, are they dictating the game? No, that's not the case. It's just more, they're just a supportive role. And so we're trying to figure it out. It's all new. Yeah, very exciting. I really feel happy to be part of, in some kind of partnership with OTK. Just they have a really great creative energy, and they're partnered with a few other companies who now are kind of working with us a little bit. Like Razer is one of their sponsors, and so they wanted to hook us up with some stuff. And like it's just it's cool. So
yeah, it didn't even really feel like it was a different tier of games exposition that week than say the Keeleys to me, just because they were all running on the same week and kind of back-to-back days. None of the conferences really seemed like more prestigious or kind of done up than the others. I felt like OTK's production was crazy. It was equally on the level, I would say, and it was neat to see the real kind of democratization of games news across that week. I feel like the boundaries between AAA and where AAA will go and how, indie announces and presents and where that will go, like it's all sort of really starting to run together. And it was really interesting to see that this week, with everything being online too.
Yeah. Tomorrow, actually, we're going to go on to Allcraft. So we're going on Asmund's podcast with, I think, Rich and S-Fan will be there too. So I'm not sure who from Noto is going to be there. I think it's probably going to be me and maybe John and Cole. I'm not too sure yet. Still trying to figure it out. That's like the one thing. I mean, I think, Kevin, you've been on Allcraft, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the challenge with OTK is they're almost like a startup in terms of like they're very they're very kind of like last minute. It's all comes together at the end, and it's all
right.
There's no coordinators and all this like professional kind of thing. I mean, actually, they're a lot more professional than I thought. Like in terms of their team is a lot bigger than I anticipated. But it's just it's a little kind of quick and dirty. So I'm still not even sure yet what the agenda will be. But it's gonna be tomorrow probably. I think what is it? 3 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Pacific. So we'll be talking a little bit more about the game and vision and stuff there, and that'll be fun.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And in terms of like what the role of their role is, OTK. I know I've already started pressuring S-Fan about not screwing up the Paladin class, so I'm going to hold it to him. Hold him to it.
Yeah. We only showed 3 classes so far that we've.
By the way, it's a joke. I have no idea. For everyone listening.
You can imagine the classes we aspire to do, but we haven't shown any of the others yet. And it's just, and that's the thing too, right? It's so early that anything can change, and so one of the biggest challenges is kind of setting the expectations, just because we don't want the expectations to go wild, right?
For sure.
Yeah. You remember Dire Cat Forum, Kevin? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, so...
And you've seen a little bit of that.
Sorry, what did you just say to Kevin? You see something form? Oh, Dire Cat Form. Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't hear you correctly. I was like, is this the code name for some secret kind of WoW Forms board that I forgot existed? But no, okay.
Yeah, so Dire Cat Form was the game director at the time of World of Warcraft, Tom Chilton, set up BlizzCon that they're going to add Dire Cat Form. And then all the systems team looked at each other like, wait, what?
Oh, shit.
Like, I guess we're adding Dire Cat Form.
And that happened a little with the Red MMO. They didn't have much to show or talk about it. And Greg Street has a real presence on Twitter. And now, you see him occasionally get bombarded with these questions, that are very much further along in the process, right? Like, what's your monetization model going to be? And he's just like, all right, everyone pump the brakes, like we got to talk through all this stuff. And the expectations start immediately, right? So you're going to have to be wary of that and navigate that, which is always a challenge.
Yeah, but I mean, you acknowledged it yourself. That's kind of one of you still made the decision to engage early because you felt like you wanted to get everybody piped in there into the development process. So even though it does mean that there's more room for speculation and expectations to build up and, impatience, people critiquing things, that's how you kind of get people bought in at this stage. So this was pretty much like the second biggest reveal you've done. I guess you had the studio announce.
Yeah.
Like what was kind of your biggest challenge or freak out going into this? I mean, it sounds like you didn't have to prepare a big vertical slice, which is really nice. So like, what is the stress of this announcement? Like, how does that kind of manifest? Did it mean anything for the rest of the team, or did you kind of shelter them for it and just handle everything?
We did film that video, and we probably filmed a couple hours of footage of us just talking about different aspects of the game. But again, it was challenging just because we're just like, well, there's a lot of stuff, we have like a build indicative of the core experience and playable classes and all these things internally. But it's just all like Unreal gray box kind of stock assets. Like people will look at it and go, what the hell's that? Like, but that's like kind of the early stages of game development. And so we weren't ready to like share those sort of things. And there's a lot of other aspects about the game and the project that we're just not ready to share yet. But and so that was like the challenge, is like trying to find the right kind of things that we can say and not say. It all came like really quick, and we don't have like communication specialists or anything internally in the studio, and so it was we didn't typically the team, a lot of us came from Blizzard, so I'm not sure if you did this, Luca, but at BlizzCon you go through like media training and you go through all these rehearsals and stuff like that. And so at Noto, they're like, well, are we going to rehearse or whatever? I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Like, this is a startup. This is happening, fast. So just wing it, And so there's a little bit of apprehension and nervousness there. But I think it came out good because in the end, Trevor and Finn, they edited the video and it came out great. And, we said what we kind of wanted to say. I pretty much tanked most of the logistics and planning for everything and that sort of thing. So the team didn't really have to worry about it. What I told the team is just like, we don't need to prepare anything necessarily for this. It should just be authentic to what we're doing right now. But I think some of the artists did kind of crunch a little bit on some of the concept pieces to make them a little more presentable and stuff like that, which I think was a good investment, actually.
Yeah, I think the gaming audience is a little too keen and has seen too much vaporware happen to not let this go without even at least some concept art at this point. But like, I thought that not that you needed to be bailed out, but I was really happy to see the conversation up on that stage start to go to Esfand talking about his experiences of the playtest, because I don't think that a lot of people, even if they want to get hyped for something and they understand the logistics of making games and where iteration happens, I don't think they were really ready to, just stare at full gray box. I think that that's probably not a level of candor we're at just yet. And so it was cool to see, like, in real time, kind of a lot of the, like, well, why is it only concept art? Where's the actual gameplay sort of discussion come up? And then, like, you couldn't even really suppress the discussion up on stage about, but we did the play test. And the ball and chain with the warrior, like, man, it was just, like, I landed one, and I was, because I got to play test it a month or two ago, and that was the experience that I had. And so I'm really glad that people are talking up, the fun and the experimentation that's going on there. So it doesn't just seem like we got some pictures and trust us,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that was the other thing that was cool was they did play test the game. We filmed their reactions. We didn't show the footage of the game, but we filmed the reactions, which were authentic and which was fun because, every time we play test the game, the way in which I know it's kind of like it's doing good is just that people have stories afterwards and they laugh and it's like a good time and people, sometimes it's like a LAN party kind of experience. Yep. And so
that's how it felt.
It's good. So.
Are you reading the comments, by the way? What's the aftermath of it like? How have things changed since this happened? I guess we'll kind of get into that with the main topic, but...
You mean the comments about the announcement, you're saying?
Yeah, just an expression, like don't read the comments because there's always people just shitting on the latest thing that you've done. I mean, just like how was it to kind of birth this thing and then get to monitor it afterwards? Or was he just kind of like, all right, back to work, and most people were like relatively unruffled and you just kind of keep going?
Oh, I mean, I kind of prefaced the team or some of them in the beginning. I was like, you guys have some experience about this at the WoW team, but, we're going to show some stuff and there's going to be some people who are like, will troll it or like say it's trash or something like that's inevitable. And so just realize like, let's just stay focused on what we're doing. And, this is just kind of player psychology and just take it as, we all have to be, designers do this the best, or they're expected to do this the best because we're the ones on the front lines of the player usually. But you need to be able to just parse feedback, even if it's troll, feedback or whatever, and go, oh, that's interesting. I guess they really don't like ability or something like that, rather than just taking it personally, But actually, I think the bulk of the feedback was pretty positive. I mean, the only kind of like angsty feedback was like, where's the gameplay, which is like fair enough, But yeah, I mean, I think the reception was good. I think it hit the good markup because I didn't know what to expect, it hit. I think the OTK game show was the perfect kind of platform because it was people who understand kind of the heritage of the type of game we're making, like where we came from, the WoW team, because that's part of OTK's like DNA with their audience. And then also just kind of, it's an indie kind of thing, right? Like if you notice at like the Jeff Keighley's summer show, a lot of people are more critical there. The expectations are a lot higher. Like they want every game they see to be like on par with Elden Ring, And so that wouldn't have been the best platform for us at this stage, just because we have no kind of gameplay footage yet to show and, not even a game title yet, right? I think the audience is and where you kind of show the project at different stages is important.
Well, if people want more of this, I guess they can just catch you on Allcraft tomorrow. You should just drop a link again in chat and kind of tag that in announcements, maybe even afterwards, just so we don't forget.
I'm going to tweet it out later.
Okay,
I kind of softly announced it because we got OTK. Another nice thing they did was they did a raffle for some PCs. They're raffling, I think, 5 or 6 PC like whole rigs, like in the sweepstakes or in this contest. And so all you got to do is follow OTK and follow Noto Studios, our Twitter. And we actually went from like 2K followers to over 30K since they did that. So that was nice of them. I didn't even know they were doing that until I was on stage there. So yeah, go ahead and follow our Twitter and then OTKs. And I think we're going to announce the winners tomorrow on the show.
Nice. That's all it takes is give free stuff away. Who knew?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all want to talk about some news? I was just perusing, and it looks like the season of layoffs that we were starting to talk about a couple of weeks ago is beginning, or coincidentally, it looks like Unity and Niantic both got layoff stories in the news. Yeah, Unity not being a game development studio, so to speak. Niantic was kind of surprising. I think it was like 8% of their workforce, which is chunky. There are like 100 or so people there, but I don't know. I haven't looked too much into the details behind those, but I expect it's not going to be the last.
Pokemon Go, right?
Yep. Formerly Ingress. Yeah. But the big one for me this week is it came out a day or two ago, I think, that Blizzard is acquiring Proletariat, the Spellbreaker developers, to add them directly to the World of Warcraft team. It's crazy.
That was this morning, I think.
It was this morning. Okay. Yeah. What is time?
Yeah.
It's nutty to see 100 new people bolted onto a team just like that externally. Maybe something like this has already happened to a degree when, like Vicarious officially got rolled in, in terms of like you got to spread the resources around. But that's a lot of people to throw at WoW Edit and Dragonflight so quickly. And the announcement date was announced, the release date was announced since our last podcast too, which we now know is going to be inside of this year. So they're either further ahead than we thought, or they are working like crazy to get it out there, or both. I don't know. What are your guys' takes on getting this whole new batch of developers in here? And also keep in mind, this is still under the pending mega acquisition of being swallowed up by Microsoft, which I think I kind of didn't know that you could do this. Can you really have companies acquiring companies while they're also being acquired at the same time? Like, everything's getting swallowed.
Yeah, it strikes me as just pure chaos. Like, I can't even fathom the impact that something like that would have had back on us when I was there. But I mean, the team for most of the time that I was there was sub 100 people. So, but nowadays it's like something in the 300 range, or I'm not sure, but Chris could answer that. But
it's probably bigger at this point. Yeah.
right. So like, I mean, I got to the point where I was, starting to feel like, I don't even know people that are on the team. Like I walk all the way across the floor, have to interact with somebody about something that I've never met. It felt really strange. And so I don't know, like the idea of how the day-to-day works in terms of collaboration between departments and all that kind of stuff seems like it's a completely foreign environment to what I remember. So I don't know if adding 100 people is necessarily pure chaos, or if they have sort of the logistics for adding people down a little better. But in terms of what I remember, it would have been just absolute chaos.
Yeah, you weren't on the team when they did the whole go to the moon strategy or whatever? Were you there? I don't think you were. So at some point, Activision, this was after the acquisition of Activision. Activision was like, why is this team so small? World of Warcraft is a huge IP.
COD, right? Like,
why? Players are demanding more content at a faster pace. Why is this team so small? Why don't you just grow it? I think for a Fortune 500 company of the class that Activision Blizzard was, I can understand that. That makes sense, I guess. The challenge there is, how do you grow the team? Like, they wanted to double the size of the team, right?
Right.
And they kind of did in terms of personnel. But what they learned was, you're not going to be able to just double the team overnight and then just do double the work, like double the product, or like that quickly, because it takes a long time to train everybody,
and also
how
just
it works.
a
Then
huge
you have all the
percentage of
management
that
bloat.
A huge percentage of that new group is also just has to be logistically handled. So like
then
the
you have
number
to
of
have
managers, the percentage of managers goes way up.
Yes,
as you
and then
increase the size of the team.
Yeah, then you have to have all the people who are ICs now have to become leads, because you need more leads, right? It's just become, there's so many challenges with doing that. It's just not like what you would. So anyways, and what happened really, I think, with that go to moon strategy, like the postmortem was like, well, the postmortem was just like, it's not just as simple as just hiring a bunch of people. And then also a lot of the senior people kind of thought, well, this is my chance to go to a different team now. And so a lot of people went to Titan or to, some of the other projects or whatever. And so then you lost a lot of senior people who knew, and WoW was a team that basically lived on tribal knowledge. And so you lost all the senior people who knew how to make the game, knew what WoW was, all that sort of thing. And then you have all these new people on here, and then you have kind of the new veterans trying to lead them, and it was kind of it was just kind of messy, right? Yep. And so really they never achieved what they wanted, which was essentially a team big enough to do 2 expansions at once. And so that's always something they wanted to aspire to, because that's how Call of Duty works, right? Is they have Infinity Ward and they have Treyarch, and they both make Call of Duty games, and so you keep churning out Call of Duties, and it keeps like the market going, and the players happy to some degree, at least because there's new stuff coming out at a regular pace every Christmas or whatever it is. So anyways, that's an aspiration for them to do at all the different IPs, I think, long term. It's just there's so many challenges to do that. One is like, where are you getting these people? Because right now, the industry is really challenging to hire right now. Like there's so many options, more than ever before. There's a lot of different startups. There are all these other different mega companies. There's just so many game studios right now, and not enough devs to fill all the open roles. Like there just isn't. And so what Blizzard did here with Proletariat, and what they did with Vicarious Visions for Diablo, is what they call an acqui-hire, where they acquire a studio essentially to hire all the talent there. And so I've heard through the grapevine, the biggest thing that they were excited about Proletariat was the art muscle that they had. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of like how it works out. I imagine, and you get this a little bit, Kevin, like you weren't there when they did. I mean, there's never anything like this there when you were there, but there may have been times where they would cancel projects, or they would ship a game at the studio, and you would get those teams absorbed onto the team. So it's like that, but on crack. And so,
right, for sure,
Yeah, and even then, that never felt great as a dev because you're like, oh, this guy we don't even interview them. They just show up next to the next
right.
day. Like, that's a weird thing, but it's kind of like a pro and a con at a studio like Blizzard because you have all these different teams underneath one banner that can interchange. And so it's kind of like a larger tribe, but then a con because you kind of have to inherit them like a family. And I don't know. It's
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's again where like Pardo would step in and be like, no, you're just gone. Like talking about people that had worked on a failed game. Like some would see it as an opportunity to, cut some of the chafe, right? Yeah, and then keep the quality. It's always really rough, like nobody likes that because, there's relationships and, it's not always their fault when things like a project doesn't work out and, stuff like that. So
yeah, it's the window for getting something out and having it, either 100x or completely fall on its face is so short now. I mean, my contact list is just littered with people that have done exceptional work on games that have lasted like a month in the market before people are laughing at their Steam numbers, and it's like they're not bad. It's just a real vicious space. So I definitely don't. I guess I don't really have much to say about why Spellbreak didn't turn into the greatest battle royale that's out there. They obviously are like a really talented bunch of people if they're being scooped like this. But I think it's interesting reading the article that Blizzard sought them out is what it sounds like it happened. There's a quote from John Haidt talking about reaching out to them. And I was just kind of wondering, I guess, which way the acquisition energy flowed here. Who approached who? Is this like a time where if you're in a company, you're like looking to sell? How do you float that out there? How do these discussions get started? If they originate from the developer, they have kind of a bit of an aura of desperation to them. It's sort of just like, well, you must need to be acquired if you're kind of out there.
Right.
Whereas if you're being,
just also the, that idea of they were really excited about the art muscle, right? Like, is that what's holding WoW expansions back? The art creation assets?
Oh,
I'm not so sure, right?
Yeah, well, that was going to be another question that I had, because obviously the composition of Proletariat is that of a full-on game developer that was working on their own game, and with every acquisition there are redundancies and integration challenges and stuff like that. All the euphemisms, but I'm wondering, like, what discipline do you think bolts on most easily to working on WoW? Especially like remotely.
It's like probably art.
Yeah, you probably art. Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
I mean, I would think so. I think engineering is challenging because of the code base. WoW has a very specific type of code base, which every engineer I've talked to who's come to WoW or left or whatever has always spoke very highly about it in terms of code quality and organization, but it is kind of esoteric and unique. Certainly WoW Edit is also a challenge to work with. Like if you're a developer, like there's a spin up time. I think the engine or the editor actually in hindsight is pretty great in terms of just if you're entering like a quest or ability or things like that, it's pretty good.
Yeah, still to this day, it's one of the best I've ever worked on.
Yeah. But there is some spin up time to get into that.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do think the artist is probably the easiest just because all those tools are pretty
easiest. I guess the question I was asking is like from the player perspective, when Dragonflight comes out, what's the thing that's going to that they feel the game and the brand and the franchise like needs to really improve on the next time out? Like is it art? Because I wouldn't say so. Is it code? Right? Like to me it's kind of design. Like
what
you
might be a minority there, most, right? Like
and obviously I am a very specific perspective, right? So, and it could be that the people that are playing and still playing and pre-ordered Dragonflight and are really excited about it, they just want more content, and that means more art, right? For the most part, like more bosses to kill, more dungeons to run through, more cool spell effects, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple different kind of questions there. It's like, well, what kind of acquisition or what kind of way could be better make WoW a better game from like game design as an art perspective or like a better player experience perspective? Like there's that, which I don't think is really this is a focus on, maybe like kind of, but it's more of like how can we achieve our development milestones from a high level production standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Which I think that's what this is about, right?
Right.
So, which is not to say that's unimportant, but like you said, it's I think you're more focused on the former,
Right.
which I think is a lot more complicated, right?
They're still operating under the illusion that they can, double the size of the team and get double the product, right? They haven't really come to grips with the fact that it doesn't really work.
I think the Vicarious Visions acquisition kind of gave them a lot of confidence, I think, because I've heard that went pretty decently in terms of people are happy working with the VV guys.
But that was mostly that team doing a very specific thing. It wasn't like a merge with another team. Wasn't it mostly Vicarious that was doing Resurrected?
Oh, okay, well, VV's also working in D4.
Okay, so since Resurrected, they've branched out into other areas. Okay.
Yeah. So they had to go that same journey of being integrated on D4 as well, and so I think that's been
that's
kind of going
unproven
okay.
Yet. Okay. Internally, they might be satisfied, but we haven't seen the results. These are just in terms of Diablo 4.
Yeah. I don't know 100% for sure, but that's kind of the sense I get from people I've chatted with. But
but it's gone well. Okay.
Yeah. So, but I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it's definitely interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah,
it's here. What's really interesting.
What's Candace think? Welcome, Candace.
Hi. I heard Kevin saying something about needing designers to make the game, and I was thinking, hell yes. And here's why. If you look at the credits for World of Warcraft over the years, you can look at which team is like by far the largest team, and like excluding obviously like QA and CS, which are totally valid, like they're part of the team and very important. But I mean, of the people that are in the creating the assets and stringing it all together, like design is by far the largest. They got like 75 or something on or 80 or something I counted for Battle for Azeroth, and they got like five VFX artists, and they have like I don't know. The art to design ratio, you can tell by the credits, is pretty large. So getting more designers means making more World of Warcraft. But then it's funny because, as you can also tell if you watch the trend of the credits for World of Warcraft, like the team getting larger did not make more WoW. Like in fact, WoW went from like a 1.5 year expansion development cycle to like more like over 2 years, right? With both Shadowlands and Battle for Azeroth or something. And that's like part of that is like the growing pains of a team and stuff. But a lot of that is also just organizational problems and the way that like the traditional like pyramid style organization chart just doesn't scale well at some point because you always have your bottlenecks.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. But you are saying that the design team has grown disproportionately larger than the art team?
I don't know if it's disproportionately larger. I just know that there are a fuck ton of game designers on World of Warcraft.
That's interesting. Because I also feel like that can be detrimental if things aren't extremely organized in terms of how things process. Like fewer people making important decisions tends to lead to better results.
Yes. I think it's kind of like what we chatted. I think we chatted about this with the John Stats episode, but it's like, there's a benefit to saying there's no set quest designer. There's a designer who does multiple different things because then you get less kind of, perfectionistic quests or like quests that are just over designed because it's just like one of many different responsibilities they have. Right. And so, you get that kind of effect, I think, when you balloon out the design team, it's hyper specialized. And then I think that was another postmortem too, is just that, we grew the team and we have more people working on it, but then we also rose the bar for everything. Like the zones now have to have like 1,000 quests per zone instead of like 200. And we, the zones need to have like all bespoke assets everywhere. We can't reuse anything. And, whatever, like the expectations for all of the different aspects of the game increased over time as well. Probably to
back in the day, we used the Apple bucket for everything, and people loved it.
Yeah.
Notably missing from this press release surrounding the acquisition is a price tag, which is weird because I feel like that's the thing that everybody's eyes pop out at every acquisition in the last year and a half. So don't see it. Who knows what happened there? But I was thinking, man, it's. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it was free. Yeah, Proletariat's just bored. They just hopped over. Well, unless y'all have anything more to say about that, I was thinking we round into the main topic, which Candace had proposed, talking about interview culture, which I would say both Chris and Candace seem like real well acquainted with. I would say current even. And I'm kind of wondering, like, especially with people asking for so much more lately and the options for remote work being in play and just like the buyer-seller environment that we're in now, what are your biggest observations or what sticks out to you when you think about interviewing for games today? What's kind of the process like? How do you feel like it's probably different from when you started? Where are we at? Like, give us the state of play.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about interviewing because it's like the number one question I get is how do I get into games? And how do I get my shot? And what do I do if I get an interview? And I was like, well, I guess we could talk about that in Theorycraft because it is part of making games is like landing the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't like interview tips and tricks as much as it is just like I just like to talk about and get experience from the table about like when Chris is interviewing someone, like what are you looking for? And like I've been interviewing a lot and like as the interviewee, like I can tell you about my experiences and like what I think people are looking for. I've also been in like 3 very different I have interviewed other people and the cultures have just been wildly different. Where like one is like a fact-finding mission and you're just collecting data points and then to the other end of the extreme is like I literally just think I'm in the room because they want to ask if I would have drinks with this person. Like I'm just a culture fit check and they don't care if I have assessed their craft in a meaningful way. So anyways, there's just lots to talk about when it comes to interviewing. And I just love to know, like, I guess starting with Chris, like, I'll just ask you a question, which is when you're interviewing someone, because this is hot shit. Like everyone wants to know, like, what do you want from me when you're interviewing for me? And since you're kind of a big deal now, like when you walk into an interview, what are you looking for? And who else have you assigned to look for other things for you? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, where to, I think interviewing for a company or for any company is like, Valve is famous for saying this in their culture deck. It's like the most important thing, like more important than breathing, is like interviewing and hiring at the company because you could hire the wrong person and it could affect the culture and really affect the company and its long-term success. Or you could hire somebody who, other companies didn't quite see the magic that you did. And so being able to see that in a candidate is really important. And yeah, I mean, there is no kind of, I think, set way to do it. I think it just all kind of depends on like what the company and what its values and what you're kind of looking for. I think for us, there's a lot of other schools of thought now too that are modern about interviewing. For sure, I think one of the big ones to combat, because there's this issue where, like hires like, and so you basically hire somebody just like you, and then suddenly your whole company is a bunch of like-minded people who all just think the same way, have the same kind of ideas, etc., which is just usually not good these days because you want to have a diversity of thought and also experience on the team. And so you really need to make sure when you're hiring and when you're asking questions and selecting that you're asking the same questions to each candidate for the role or for the position. And so you can compare them on like data, not on just like, oh, I like that guy, or, it's just, I had a feeling, like you got to separate the feelings from like the hard kind of data. Right. And so I think that's important. And, there's a lot of school of thought of talking about, rather than, it used to be a very big thing, like culture fit, like, oh, let's find a culture fit, which I still think is important, but also kind of think about it as culture add. Like, how can we add somebody to our existing culture to, add a different dimension of thought that we didn't have, right? If it could be this person, it could be as simple as like, well, they play a lot of mobile games. And so maybe they think about systems or game design in a different way that we don't, like a blind spot that we have, right? Like that could be something. Or, somebody who is very extroverted and is about like culture building and cross collaboration or something could be something, an asset to your culture or whatever, right? So yeah, I think those things are important. There was this book that I read that helped me build the framework and process for our interviewing process, which is called Who, a Method of Hiring. And it has this kind of processes of using like a scorecard to interview people. And like it has like, one thing is like I interviewed before Noto at other company or at Blizzard. But at Blizzard, you only are in the interview process after the sourcing. Like, there's managers who find the candidates, talk with them. They do a screening call to see if they're not like a wacko or somebody like who's lying about what they're doing or whatever. And so the positions that you have at a larger company are filtered out already. Like you're getting kind of like, it's just really kind of to see if it's a culture fit or if they will, they will work with the team, like if they'll be an asset to the team. And so, but for me, since we're doing everything from the initial kind of headhunting or sourcing or whatever, so I had to build a pipeline for that. I'll spare you the whole kind of that whole part of it. But so what we look for in the interview is we make a set list of qualifications that we're looking for in the candidate, and then we kind of score them on those aspects objectively. And then afterwards, we kind of like everybody kind of grades them, and then we say, kind of vote whether we want to hire them or not. There's other like I could talk about other soft qualities that we kind of look for in terms of like who we want to work with. One thing Valve says that I like is like imagine this person as your boss someday, because this person if you think about that, right, Candace, when you applied to Blizzard or Kevin or whatever, or Ian or all these people, well, at some point they may become a lead or somebody's boss at the company. And so I think it's important to like think about that too when you interview somebody. Like, they may be at the company for a long time, and you don't want to be like, well, they're like a dick, and like I wouldn't never want to work under them, but they're just for this like, they're just going to make us textures, so whatever.
Right.
I hear you there. Yeah, whenever I think about interviewing people, there's so many axes, and Chris covered a lot of these. There's like culture fit and culture add, which is huge. There's like adding diversity to thought, because like Chris said, if you just keep hiring the same person over and over again, like one, you're probably going to be in one demographic, which is also really bad. But then two, you're also not getting the thought diversity of like different perspectives and stuff. And so you have to train the people who are interviewing to value dissent and to value people who think in a different way. And I think that's also really hard right now in like today's job market, because you also want to value somebody's experience. But people don't get experience. Like you can't, that's the whole problem, where you can't get experience unless you're given the opportunity to do it. And then you're not getting those fresh perspectives because you're valuing experience more than you're valuing thought diversity. So I really appreciate the call out there.
Yeah, and I would add to it as well.
Yeah, go.
Just in the like different, it's less to do with culture for me, although obviously it's very important. But like when I'm interviewing designers, one of the things I always look for is, and I'll come back to this other thought, but I'm not looking for someone to tell me the right answer. I'm looking for how people go about trying to solve the problem. That to me is what's important. And I think a common mistake for interviewees is they're trying to think of that there is a right answer, and they're either trying to noodle it out right there, which is obviously very difficult, especially the kind of questions I ask, which are sometimes problems I haven't been able to solve in like 3 months of thinking about it. And I spring it on some poor interviewee. Or they're trying to like feel you out and look for clues on what you think is the right answer, which, again, is like, that's a trap, like don't do that in interviews. That might work with some people, I suppose, but for me, that's like a sign that you care more about being my buddy than, challenging what we're talking about and thinking about it from a different perspective. And so when you talk about like culture add or culture diversity, to me, it's like perspective diversity, because the thing that allows you to think through a problem from a different angle and challenge the current way of thinking and come up with a new idea, a new approach, is having that different perspective. And so that can be really important. Like you had said with mobile games, like if you come from a mobile game development standpoint, you might have a very different way of approaching just any kind of design problem. And that can help you a lot when it comes to solving problems that have sort of been stuck in the development process amongst a team for a while. So I really like hearing, different perspective, and also just trying to see how people think through solving problems rather than, actually being able to solve them right then and there. So
that's really important too, because what you're saying is basically like it's not about how correct the answer is. You can take the pressure off of it. Sometimes it's just like, how are you getting to the answer? What kind of questions are you asking to get there? Where does your brain go? And I think like, didn't Google have a bunch of those trap questions? Like there is no, or like the right answer is like very hard to come by, and they just want to see like how, like some windows, how many windows do you think are in New York or some shit? Like that's like a not knowable number. But like, how did you go about thinking about it?
How many jelly beans are in the jar?
Yeah.
And I'll be eating them, of course. So
yeah, and then you're like, whatever you said, -1, you'll eat it right in front of them. Like you don't get the job. Yeah, I just want to talk about like so many people think that they don't get a job because they're not good enough for it. They're like, oh, my technical craft wasn't enough, or I didn't prove that I was good enough at my craft to get the job. And like, well, first of all, I want to tell you like, no, there's also like 100 other reasons you didn't get the job. One of which is that your craft was not strong enough. Another could be like someone more experienced, or that someone that had more craft experience or knowledge or thought differently came along. And so it's not like you failed. It's just that like you were good enough for the job, but also someone else came along who was like better for it. And I think a lot of people can't see that, and they're just like, oh, I shouldn't apply for this job ever again because I didn't get it once, which proves I can't do it. And it's like, that's just not the case. But among those hundreds of other reasons, I kind of wanted to dig into a couple of the ones that I care about whenever I interview people. And as I've interviewed for like probably like 25 jobs since the pandemic, like 25 different jobs, and each one of those is sometimes 1 to 3 interviews. So I've been on a lot of interviews since the pandemic started, and I'll say that like I can identify these questions in other people now too. So like one, yes, what is your level of expertise? And so sometimes you can read someone's resume and like see the titles they worked on and see the buzzwords, but you don't know what that meant for their day to day. So you're asking questions like, like what kind of problems do you solve? And how many times have you solved problems like this or problems like that? And so you'll ask questions about like, what are you experienced in specifically? And a lot of that is part of the craft, but things that aren't part of your craft are things like you'll hear questions like, how do you work? Like do you tend to collaborate, or do you tend to silo? And where do you value? Whereas like there's no right answer to that question. They're trying to see like, would you work well on this team? How do you resolve conflict? If we were to throw conflict in front of you, are you like fight, flight, freeze? Or do you lean in with curiosity? Are you open and receptive to feedback? Sometimes you'll even give them a trial question just to give them feedback, just to see how they respond to it. Like, are they curious? Are they offended? Are they defensive?
Yeah.
Because culture feedback is so important, and so, at least in game design. And so, but then there's also like, what problems are you excited to solve? Like, coming into this role, we have 5 big thought problem spaces you could solve, and do we see you being someone who can solve these problems for us? And so, like, where are your tendencies? What don't you like to solve? What have you done in the past that you didn't like to do, and why didn't you like to do those things? And these are questions that are just as important as like, what have you done in your past? Is like, what do you like to do and what do you not like to do? And so you'll also get questions that are gauging like, what do you think of our product? Like, are you experienced in our product? Do you like our product? Would this just be a job for you? Is this your dream job? Like, what's your level of ambition? And then lastly, like, a lot of the questions will have to do with your level, which is like, we're hiring for a associate game designer or something, but I'm trying to find out if you like are, or let's say like mid-level. I'll ask you questions at like an associate level that demonstrates the competencies of an associate to see if you like have those kind of competencies. But then I'll also ask questions above your level to see, oh, maybe this person is actually more of a senior, and if not, if they haven't demonstrated these competencies, then how much growth potential do they really have? And I'll really like dig in to, oh yeah, I think this person could actually like grow a lot in this role, and within a couple of years they could be, the next rank up. Or yeah, they have strong management skills. We should probably get them into management training. So there's just so much that people are looking at when they interview you. So little of it is, I didn't get the job because I'm not fucking good enough. And so I'll get off my soapbox now. So, well, Alpha, I see you're up here. Did you have something to ask, or do you have something to add?
Oh yeah. So like I've always been a fan of and WoW of like like the unreleased content, like the stuff you see in the files, or like kind of like these mysterious areas. Do any of you know like the Tower of Eldara in Ajara? Do you know that there's like a weird mysterious tower, and like I'm just like a big fan of those zones, and I was wondering about like two BGs, which is like Defense of the Ale House and the unreleased like Ajara BG. Like, is there any like interesting, I don't know, trivia if you guys like, I don't know, ever worked on it, or had like discussions with the team? It's kind of a very specific question, but I don't know if you guys can answer that.
Yeah, I didn't work on it. I think the only person that might have is Chris.
What's the scoop? Someone's got to know.
Huh?
Wait, what were the maps again? Defense of the Ale House, and what was the other one?
I don't know that
And
one.
Ajara Crater?
Yeah, Ajara Crater.
Yeah, Kevin.
That was an attempt to be a different BG, and then it was an attempt to be a different look for the same. I think it was Alterac Valley. It was supposed to be a second type of Alterac Valley, if I remember right.
Yeah.
But then we sort of decided. We actually started that one first, and then we decided, why do that when we could just come up with a whole new BG? And so Kaplan came up with Arathi Basin. He pitched an Arathi Basin model that we all sort of jumped on. And I'm like, yeah, let's just do that instead. So Crater got pushed sort of indefinitely and never came to be. But we had always kind of planned, let's do, different looks and slightly different maps for the same basic layout or same basic mechanical type of BG. So a different capture the flag, a different Dota style, and then a different capture point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the Defense of the Ale House was like, it was like an actual Dota map that they were trying to prototype. But I think ultimately that turned into Deepwind Gorge. It kind of just turned into, it turned into that instead, I think. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and Alterac Valley was supposed to be a Dota map, but it didn't realize
Alterac
that.
AV, yeah.
Yeah, so.
I mean, the challenge with the
it's
Dota
interesting
map,
that you guys came back to it and tried to
yeah, I mean, it's
make it for real this time.
yeah. I mean, Dota, again, this is like before League, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously AV was. And just Dota was just a game that everybody at the company was kind of playing and a big fan of. And so it was always just like, I love this game. Let's put it into WoW. It just, and that's kind of like what Smite is, is that similar kind of thing. And so, yeah. So, but
I think all the people that wanted it to be in WoW were all too busy with other things to make AV actually happen. So that's why AV sort of deviated, because the people working on it weren't big, like Dota players. So it turned into something else, which was still amazing in its own way, but not really a Dota experience.
Yeah. I was also working on like a Dota feature too that was more elaborate. Like you would like collect different heroes in the game, like Jaina, and then she has different abilities. You could level her up and stuff. It was like a game within a game thing. It was probably too crazy, but the whole Dota kind of like thing to build into the game has always been something that a lot of people talked about. And I think the problem with Dota is just or a MOBA essentially is just that there's all these pieces to it to make it great. And you can't just, as we've seen kind of with, no offense to anybody about with HOTS or some other MOBAs, is that if you don't put all the different pieces together, you get a whole different thing, which is fine, but it's not, it's just, you can't, it's like trying to make like pizza, then like, what if we just don't use any wheat or something? It's just like, you got to have all the different ingredients to make a MOBA, and so, with WoW, what are you going to do? Like, you have to build the whole item progression system. You have to have like different roles. You have to have, how does it work now when a player has 30 abilities? And it's just, there's so many things to consider. It's just not, it doesn't just simply, let's make a 3-lane map and boom, we have a MOBA, it's like, yeah. But,
I just think it's interesting. Like, I know like we have Smite and stuff, but I always found the WoW combat system to be like, for me at least, like the most interesting out of all those games, because I tried them all, but I don't know, just have a big, deep love for the combat system. But yeah, great answer, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you for the question. Mars, you got a question?
Yes, I do. So this is response to what Candace was talking about sort of asking questions, say associate level questions to a mid, and senior level questions to a mid. The question is, what are the things that you have sort of all consistently seen throughout your years in interviewing that has sort of separated someone from associate to mid, mid to senior, senior lead, and so on? Like, what are those qualities and what are those answers you keep seeing that like, okay, this person probably is, the right level or they're above their level or below their level?
Yeah. I usually measure it by two things. One is like scope of what you do and can do, and then two is the impact of the things that you do. And like kind of scope and impact also have to do with like, well, how much hand holding did you need by someone of the same craft, I guess is the best way to say it. Like, did you need and hand holding it's tricky too, because you don't want to hire someone because you don't want to hire someone who's not collaborative, right? So saying like, this was all my idea, that doesn't score you any points either, like, but it's more of like, what were you able to produce and bring to the finish line? How big was it? How many working parts were there? How many people did you have to collaborate with to do it? And like, how complex were the problems you were solving and delegated to you? And then also, then what impact did that have on your product? So like, was there measurable success? And if so, were you even interested in measuring it? How do you measure success? And so asking all of those questions is kind of like the axis of scope and then the axis of impact.
Yeah, and that might reveal itself in an interview as like people that are aware of technological issues or production issues or art issues if they're working on a design, rather than being lost in the design, minutia without any real understanding of how it could impact other departments, right? So a mid-level person's going to understand this, and they might be able to grow into that, whereas a new person might be overly focused on the one thing.
Yeah, and sometimes just consistency too. So like, okay, so you've solved this problem and it was a really complex problem and it had huge impact on your game, right? So let's say I don't know, what's a good example for a WoW? Like, you'd implemented the monk class, right? Like, it's a huge complex problem. Like, how do you add another healer? How do you add another tank? You have to talk to the VFX team. You have to do all this other stuff. Like, okay, you put another class in the game and it's hugely complex and there's a lot of scope there. And then there's the impact, which is like, how did that change the game? And it's like, well, because it had the fourth healer and it was like the crux of an entire expansion. So like, huge scope, huge impact. And then if you want to say like, well, then so that's like senior level work to me for a game as large and ambitious as World of Warcraft. And then you have to ask like, how often are you trusted with this kind of work, which would set you apart from like senior to principal? And also like, how, like, and then also, so like, have you been doing this for long enough that like I would consider that a wealth of, would you have your 10,000 hours from Malcolm Gladwell or whatever? But then also what I would look for principal would be like, did you build the framework for this? Like, can someone make a class now because you made the monk class? Like, did you set the principles of making the class? Did you make the rules of the game? And then that just goes into like huge impact, right? Because that's like team impact, that's product impact. That's the stamp that you're using to make the rest of the game. Like, are you making those stamps?
Yeah, I think, too bad John's on here. John has a really good answer to this, which is basically, he would be better at answering this or saying this than I am. But, if you're going to hire someone like associate or mid, what you want to look for and what you expect is like, are they able to like, do they understand kind of like, do they have good instincts, and are they able to learn? Are they able to, work with others and to learn and understand game design, if it's a game design position, game design at a fundamental level? Then when going to seniors kind of like, they're able to take on a system themselves and understand that system itself, and maybe kind of like how it plugs into like kind of the game. And then when you're talking principal, now your expectations on them is they understand, they have the whole game in their head. and not just game design, but how it interacts with the other disciplines, right? They understand, you don't have to understand like how to code, but you understand the ramifications of a system and what that will have on the performance of the game, or understand like how pipelines of art generally work for the game. All the different dimensions, like game development stem to stern more, right? Like, and that's the HIDA principle, I think, is you understand game development stem to stern about how like everything kind of works. And, at Nodo, it's even further because you have to understand the game as a product and like how to monetize it and like how it interacts in the market and what players it's serving. And like, there's so many different pieces to the game when you start to transcend out of like, a principal level. Yeah, that's kind of like how probably how John would say is like, really low level. Are they understand fundamentals and just kind of are they good at learning? And then at some point now they take on a system themselves and can construct that, which kind of like, maybe the monk is. And then from there, now it's about understanding how game design works and the entire Jenga puzzle of like how one little thing could have a rippling effect on all these other different systems and in the game holistically. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was really thorough. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. All right,
Goose,
let's bring up.
Welcome up.
Hey guys, thanks for
yeah.
having me.
Goose and Possum.
Yeah, this conversation is awesome. I love hearing about like interviews, and how these different companies like hire people. My question is, has there been any kind of decrease in potential candidates because of being in Southern California? Southern California being like super expensive and just crowded, and you hear nothing but bad about the traffic.
I just feel like I would probably imagine so. I feel like that was probably a gatekeeper, at least for Blizzard, for years. Honestly, like it's not for everybody. It is very expensive. It's very trafficky. Go ahead.
It's definitely something that was emphasized in the pandemic as people, one, valued their own like space more, as being locked in your home. You value like the home that you're living in more now that you're not spending a third of your life outside of it. A lot of people did a lot of introspection of like where do they want their life to go and whether or not like a really prohibitive cost of living place, like do I want a family, do I feel comfortable with the pay that I have, and like am I building a safety net? There's just all these like levels of like Maslow's hierarchy of safety and needs that people have like come to realize over the pandemic. So it's really interesting because I haven't been in the arena of like counting candidates since the pandemic. So it's really hard for me to tell. But if I had to wager, I would say that, yeah, places that are offering full remote will get more candidates. Will they get best candidates? I don't know. I don't have any kind of crystal ball, especially because if you think about the best candidates, they've already been living here for a long time. Well, not best candidates, the most senior or tenured people. They're either already here or they make enough money that like that's not a prohibitive factor. You know what I'm saying? But it definitely, like, no question will cost you thought diversity. It will no question cost you cultural diversity, gender diversity. It will, like, no question in my mind does forcing someone to live in an extremely cost prohibitive place like Southern California, San Francisco, New York, filter out people who would still be exceptional candidates who choose to live in a more secure environment.
Yeah, because I'm just hearing stories of like, for me personally, like if I were to do what I do now and live my lifestyle now here in Nashville, back in LA, I need to be paid like triple the amount at least. And I know that's like very hard for a lot of people to kind of like quantify, like, is this job really worth it? Because doing the same thing I'm doing now, I'm like, not really.
Yeah. And you will lose candidates, that way for sure. I've seen it many times. And the other interesting thing for me is it's quite a dilemma because a lot of people might demonize a company for offering different, salary structures for people in different parts of the country, say, because on paper that seems really unfair, right? But in reality, there are situations where the person is making proportionally less, for a job in, say, Southern California than they are in Nashville, right? So even though the raw salary is higher. So, companies kind of have to do that in order to attract talent, but they're demonized for it at the same time. And also we tend to think like when some companies, the part that's really rough is that some companies do look at sort of average, what do designers make in, the games industry, say in the US, right? And they look at the average and then they try to offer competitive values compared to that average. But they might live in Southern California. So that average is ridiculous, right? And so, that's why, you might see people living out of their van or whatever, taking certain jobs, right? Yeah, it's a tough thing to actually to solve from both the employer and the employee side.
Yeah, and I think you and Candace answered my next question was like, why stick in Southern California when other places may be cheaper? It's because the candidates have more senior, skill levels are pretty much in California already.
Yeah, and a lot of companies have been leaving California. So, that's part of it.
I mean, for Blizzard for a while, it was also that you knew it was such a locus of incredible talent that I think you could try to overlook a bunch of the cons of moving to SoCal because you're like, I'm going to be in proximity of all of these people, right? And that was why they were able to pay people the way that they were paying and keep pulling folks in. They developed their own super gravity at some point, But yeah, as you pointed out, post-pandemic, post everything else, the SoCal proposition hits a little different. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Candace.
Oh, no, it's fine. I just wanted to, my own experience also with getting the offers that I've gotten over the years is that in general, when I was, obviously inflation has been insane. I'm going to throw numbers that are probably really unattractive and I'm sorry, but my rent at this apartment that I have in Los Angeles right now is $4,300 a month. And it is 2022 for anyone who's listening. Hello. And then I just put notice on my apartment and they rented it. They're renting it out to somebody else. It is now $5,400 and I've only lived here for 6 months. So in 6 months, the inflation on my apartment has gone from $4,300 to $5,400, and that would be cost prohibitive for me to live here. So I'm actually kind of glad that I'm not going to stay in this apartment. But so, anyways, my point is that so when I do the math though of how much it costed me to live in Southern California or in Orange County, which the difference for me at the time was a similarly square foot place would be $2,700, and then in Los Angeles it was $4,300. So if I did the math on that, I was like, okay, so 4,300 minus 2,700. I was like, okay, 1,600 times 12 months out of the year. Okay, I need to be paid at least $20,000 more to live in Los Angeles just to cut even on rent. And so what I noticed is that in general, my offers from places in Los Angeles were anywhere between 30,000 or 20,000 and 30,000 higher than the ones in Orange County, and certainly much higher than the ones in a place like Austin or a place like New York or Chicago, wherever it was. Not New York, but then you compare that to the global market, which was no, I don't want to out the company that I was interviewing for, but it was somewhere around there. Anyway, and then you compare that to Sweden, where it's Sweden, they'll give you an equivalent of I don't know, 1/3 of what I would make at the same level in the United States, but it ends up working out for some reason. And it's just, economies are really weird. Certainly global economies are really weird. But the reassuring thing is at least when it comes to the cost of living, there is some adjustment that is made for these higher cost of living places, which is why it's also justifiable to some companies to say, hey, we offered you, X percent more because you were living in this area. You're not living in this area anymore. So we want to shave off that extra percentage that we gave you to live here.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense because I was about to ask any kind of negotiation period as far as salary range. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. TLDR, yes, to Orange County turning some people off due to cost of living. It is a
I do think Orange County, what it has going for it though is there are a lot of studios here. And so there is established kind of community of devs who just have families here and they don't want to uproot and move out of they already have houses or whatever. And so they already have lives here. And so there's a lot of just devs who just there's a culture of game development in Orange County. So, and so there is that. And, I think the area is still great. And I think it's cheaper to live in and a better quality of life than LA personally. I feel especially if you have a family. But it is increasingly becoming cost prohibitive to say buy a house. I mean, buying a house is just a killer. I mean, yeah, food and stuff is a little more expensive, but that's happening across the country, right? And so, yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think we're still trying to figure out how the cost structure is going to work. I know another startup who they have transparent salaries, and they have an algorithm for the salaries, which is basically like years of experience plus times like where you're living, which region, because there's different taxes in each region. So if you're remote and you're hiring people from all different parts of the country, each state has different taxes, and so you're paying a different amount for if you're in New York, it's a different tax situation than if you're in Kansas or something, right? And so and to do taxes in each state, you need to pay a fee and all this, and so you need to have X number of people in that state to even be able to entertain hiring someone remotely there. And it gets very complicated very fast. And then when you're doing international, it's even more complicated. And then you have all these different liabilities and tax things for all these different countries, and just it's a nightmare. And then so I don't know. It's a whole new world, and I think there's no absolutes yet. I think everybody's still trying to figure it out. But yeah. So
cool. Appreciate it. I'll leave it to Possum. I got more questions, but I'll leave it over to Possum.
No worries. Thank you. What's up, Possum?
Hey guys. Great podcast. And it's crazy hearing about the prices of living in the US. I'm paying off a mortgage at the moment in Australia, and it's $1,000 a month.
Never move.
All right. So
yeah, but
I had a
we have
question
reasonably sized spiders here, so I think that's where
I had a question about the interview and hiring process that you guys were talking about earlier. I'm going to be looking to get a job at a game studio near the end of the year. And obviously, I hear that it's very important to have, a portfolio of work that you can show to your potential employers. But I was wondering, what sort of value, if any, does it bring to the table for the hiring process if the candidate doesn't just show you their portfolio, but makes something to show you that is really related to the game or one of the games that your studio is working on? Like, if you're applying for some sort of game designer position at Blizzard, maybe you designed a new class, or you designed like a talent revamp or something, and you brought that to the interview as something to talk about and show.
I have very sad news for this. I'm going to start with the worst of the news. The worst of the news is that sometimes people who interview you, like especially if you're at a very high level position, the people that interview you won't even have a chance to look at your portfolio, unless of course it depends on your job. Obviously, like an artist, they like live and die by their portfolio. Design, like a little bit less important, but like sometimes engineers will also give you a portfolio of their like Ludum dares and shit like that. Sometimes you don't even have the time to like go over it, and you're satisfied by their resume, right? So you don't have anything to prove. You're like, oh, they've worked on this, they worked on this, and so sometimes your portfolio won't even go seen, and so it's really sad, but it's true. And then the like next rung up of sadness is like, even if they do see it, like a killer portfolio isn't always going to land you the job, because then they want to ask the probing questions of like, well, how much of this were you responsible for, and like this and this and this. And then also, I think in an art position, the closer you can get to the art style of the game, obviously the better off you're going to be. And so I think the same is with design. If you can demonstrate that you have some of the same design values as the project, and you can pick up on their design values based on playing the game and say like, oh, I have these things, that will help. But also, like Kevin was saying, like I was saying, if you can say like, and here's how my perspective is different though, and here's how I would do something differently in your game. Like often actually, a question that we'll ask designers when we're interviewing them is like, if you could redesign this zone, or if you could, like, how would you do something better than what we've already done, if that makes any sense. And so having a portfolio the same is good because it demonstrates that you understand, but having something that's different can also be like, oh, you're so much better with lines, or you're so much better with combat. Like it's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, and I would just add that the portfolio is fine to bring, but yeah, don't expect, as Candace said, don't expect anyone to actually go through it. But what is important is that you be able to sort of intelligently convey the summary of the work or the value of the work in a very, very short time, right? And then support that, the ideas with as it relates to the questions being asked. So that I think does add some value. But yeah, don't expect anyone to read it or dive into the intricacies. It's just it's probably going to be way too detailed, right? And especially in terms of design.
Yeah,
And you just don't have time, like to dive into talent trees, for example.
I think it also just depends on, what kind of the role it is, and like what's kind of what the like, like how many years of experience do you have in the industry? Have you worked in like on a game that's shipped?
Yeah, I've worked on about 10 professional projects, but they've all been like contract or freelance style. I've never worked at an actual studio, so it's a very different thing.
Are you an artist or?
Designer and programmer.
Okay. Yeah, so I think what they'll probably look at a lot is like what's your, not so much your portfolio, but like what projects you worked on, and then they'll ask you like what you did on that project, right? Or at least that's what I would do. To kind of gauge whether you have the skills and qualifications needed for what our project is, or what any project is. And so, I think probably less of portfolio is really important, more of just, detailing out the projects you worked on and what you did on them, and whether that's a fit for what they did, right? And so that's how I would go in there on the offensive, is like, hey, I'm really interested in this project. I know you're doing, combat, and this is the combat systems I built, and this is the impact I had on the team, and you be honest and authentic about what you really did, because they'll try to drill that out anyways. And I think that's the best way to go there.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Yeah, really good answers. Straight to the point. I like it. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Good stuff.
Luca?
What? Oh, you want me to just close this thing out? It's been a long one, man. I got to get out of this chair. Thanks, everybody, for coming around this week. We will try to be back in 2 weeks. We always do. Sometimes we miss. We love all the discussion. Thanks for all the questions today. Any other final words? Probably not. Chris?
No. Well, I did want to say, are you going to be in Orange County in 2 weeks, or that's later, right?
Do you not know that? Yeah, it's
I always forget the day.
3-ish weeks from now. Yeah, 3 weekends from now. Actually, exactly 3 Wednesdays from now. So
okay, sweet. Because at one point we need to do a live podcast. It would be so fun. Or not live, but I mean like us all there. You're right. So
all hanging
that'll
out.
happen one day. One day we'll do that.
I would love to, man. Yeah.
But yeah, cool. Okay.
So close. Next time. Okay.
But yeah, great show. Later, gamers.
Bye-bye.